Hey everyone, welcome to the I303 podcast with your host David Prieto. Here I share my ingenious insights and oddball opinions from the perspective of an IO. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about my experience at the 2023 Siop event, or the Society for Industrial Organizational Psychologists. With me today, I have my wife, Marjorie Guzman Prieto, who's going to be asking me some key questions, and I'm going to be sharing my feedback, my answers, and my thoughts on what my experience was like. So look forward to having this conversation with y'all.
Right. So, hey everyone, my name is Marjorie Guzman Prieto, and I am an HR business partner actually. And so I thought it would be best for me to be the one to interview David and see what his thoughts were on Siop. So, with that being said, what the heck is Siop?
Siop, that's a great question. You could think of it almost like the World Series for people who are part of the Industrial Organizational Psychology group. So here we're talking about the exciting research that's going on, different things people are working on, research and updates students are working on, and some interesting findings for some hard, fast results that students, myself included, have relied upon. Specifically, there is a groundbreaking revelation on a meta-analytic research that took place that was essentially the backbone on what most practitioners used in developing selection systems. I'll touch upon that a little bit later, but that was one of the more interesting things I found out about Siop. But in all, it's the World Series of Industrial Organizational Psychology.
All right. So, without getting too far off topic already, how about you give me Siop in 60 seconds? What were your thoughts? Like, if you could put it in 60 seconds, what would you be telling people?
Yeah, so I hadn't gone to a Siop in a couple of years, and from my understanding, this was one of the first, if not one of the first, back in person. So I got this vibe that people were excited, people were happy, people were, engaged to be talking to one another in person. I know for me, it's always nice to be in a room full of other IOs so we can get down into the nitty gritty in terms of what's going on. So one of the things I found interesting at Siop is AI was a big topic. Artificial intelligence, how to use it when it comes to leveraging it either in developing assessments or scoring assessments. One of the interesting things I didn't hear about AI, and a couple of the things that I went into, was how candidates may potentially be able to use it as part of an assessment process. Another topic that was interesting related to AI is natural language processing. Another was organizational network analysis. So it took me a little while to wrap my head around this, and from my understanding, it's a data science perspective on being able to gauge how network connected an employee is by scraping their email, Slack, Teams, other forms of online communication to be able to determine how connected someone is to other members of their organization. A couple of workshops or seminars that I went to really revolved around evaluating the effectiveness of different programs. So a quick 60-second overview is people were excited to be in person. AI was a hot topic. Evaluating program effectiveness was a hot topic. And another big topic was a complete misunderstanding on what was traditionally the gold star of meta-analytic research when it comes to developing and utilizing selection tools. So it was interesting to hear the panel's perspective on basically not bashing, but criticizing Schmidt and Hunter's original 1998 study. And we got to have the head author lead his seminar and hear others' perspectives on their take of those updated findings.
So now that we got your thoughts on 60 seconds of Siop, I do want to dive into I think you called it scraping of the Slack and the email, because I personally think that's an invasion of privacy. I wouldn't want folks to see what I am doing. But I also went to Siop, and this is something that was actually talked about in the employee listening workshop, and everybody was excited. And I don't know if that's kind of what everyone else is thinking. So what are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. My take is that's an invasion of privacy. I mean, They are scraping the conversations I'm having with my team, the emails I'm having. Why do they need to do that? For me, taking a step back and taking a broader perspective, it's almost a lack of trust. And I don't like it. I'm not a fan. I had a chance to sit at a round table with a couple of representatives from other organizations. There was somebody from Merck, somebody from a couple of other really small startup companies. One was a manufacturing company that manufactured homes. And they essentially shared that it's a little creepy to have somebody always listening and then to share what they're listening to back to your manager. And so I'm not a fan of it. The group I was sitting with was not a fan of it. But I will share, in another seminar I was sitting in, there was a representative from, I don't want to give the name, but one of the largest retailers in e-commerce, openly sharing they utilize network analysis. And I almost felt like employees didn't have a say. Now, this e-commerce company is notorious for not providing the best environments for their employees. So I wasn't surprised that they also utilized network analysis to determine how connected, how quote unquote productive employees are being. So this e-commerce company is notorious for doing that, for making sure individuals are as productive as possible. You might have seen it sometimes in headline news where some delivery drivers of this e-commerce company sometimes don't even have time to use the restroom. And so they're resorting to going in bottles. So that same company was openly sharing how they utilize network analysis.
Well, let's calm down, because one, we don't know if that's true, right? Like, let's just chill. Like, having a conversation. Let's think about also the other perspective. Like, let's think about the benefits of that. You know what I mean? Because we have to think about both sides. Because I'm thinking they're doing it because they want to hone in on a culture, from my understanding, right? That's the good thing about this, is like, are people being a part of the culture? And the bad thing, the double-edged sword on that for me is, well, if I know I'm being watched, am I really part of the culture, or am I acting to be it, right? And so, I don't know. It's kind of weird.
Yeah. And that goes back to trust. I mean, fundamentally, if somebody is always watching you, do they really trust you? And we're going to feel that as employees. And it's going to impact how we work. Whether we're more cautious in how we're communicating, we're not essentially able to be our authentic selves because someone is always watching.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I feel about that.
I did like one thing, and I feel really bad because I don't remember who said this, but I think it was in one of the panels or something that I was in. But somebody mentioned, I think it was actually in my employee listening workshop. The presenter was saying that there is a certain company, and I think I mentioned this to you, that there is a certain company that is already doing it, but allows you to opt in and opt out, right? And so if as a manager I opt in, then all that information will be scrubbed and it will be given to me and me only, which I agree with that. That I think would be good because it enhances my own personal development. But now when it starts getting into the other hands of other people, I think that's when I have a problem. So let's get into more of the nitty gritty. What was your take on the seminars? Like, I know there was one you were very excited about, but kind of put me in your shoes.
Yeah, so most of the ones I was attending really revolved around how to measure the effectiveness of programs, whether that's selection, learning and development, performance management, or evaluations. How can an organization gauge if those programs are effective or not? So I had a chance to attend a couple of those, and there was, I think BetterUp had a really good way to evaluate the effectiveness. I forget the guy's name.
Kyle.
Guy.
I don't know what his
My
last
man.
name is. And he was in every workshop or every seminar.
Interestingly enough, in one of the seminars he was a part of, the fire alarm goes off in the middle of the seminar, right when my man's about to start explaining how BetterUp evaluates the effectiveness of their coaching. And you could tell people were like, is this real? Is this not real? Should we stay? Should we go? But with that, I think he was arguing for financial ROI being the most effective way to evaluate the effectiveness of a program. And the people on the nay or negative side or the anti ROI side, they had some interesting arguments where they were sharing it's hard to really isolate the effectiveness of a program. It's also difficult to have a true ROI because there are so many potential confounds. And so they provided alternatives: social ROI, emotional ROI, or as I like to call it, return on expectations. It's basically non-monetary benefits of a program. And so my guy, Kyle, was able, I think, to do a pretty good job in fighting for or arguing for our financial ROI being the ultimate successful metric when being able to evaluate the effectiveness of a program. So those ones I thought were pretty good. The one I thought that was most interestingly engaging and exciting was advancing IO science. And so there I had a chance to meet the creator and the mastermind behind IO Psych memes, Dr. Lisa Kath. It was great to meet you. I think your memes are awesome, and I really think there is the opportunity to share the benefits and insights IO can provide to popular culture, to people at large. And so I think you're walking the good path in being able to share. IOs have a perspective too, and it's valuable, and I think it's critical for the success of organizations moving forward, especially as AI is going to increasingly take or play a larger role in organizational performance. I was watching, so not related to Siop,
Go ahead.
but I was watching a debate, or a podcast, I should say, on AI, and it's starting. These two podcasters share the power of AI. Essentially, it's going to get to the point where, as a consumer, I can type into ChatGPT and say, I didn't like the ending of Avengers Infinity War. I want you to write me an entirely new script with the same characters. A different form of AI is then going to be able to generate that movie based off the script ChatGPT created, and it's going to be able to customize that for me. And so if AI can eventually do that, rewrite an entire script and create a movie using the same characters, utilizing that new script specifically for me in the matter of 30 minutes, it can do anything. And so I'm thinking, okay, we got to share the benefits of IO far and wide before AI replaces all of us, and we're all out of a job. So Dr. Kath, Lisa, IO Psych Memes Mastermind, definitely want to continue partnering with you and getting the good word out of our program and what we can do.
And I think you should talk about what were you talking about specifically to Dr. Kath? I think that was something that kind of got the table thinking a little bit. So why don't you share that?
So one of the questions was, well, how do we do it? How do we go about sharing what IO is to, people who don't know what it is? And one of the thoughts I had was, so taking a page out of the Weinstein brothers, I don't want to get too into depth in who they are, but essentially they're advocating for being able to publish articles, publish research findings direct to consumer or direct to the public, almost like a Wikipedia version of publishing research. So it doesn't necessarily have to be peer reviewed by only other scholars in the field. It can theoretically be peer reviewed by anyone. And I think a secondary benefit of being able to publish directly to the public is it makes research free. What I don't like are these paywalls behind, different journals and different publications where you have to pay anywhere between $10, $20, $30 an article to be able to read research. I think if it's public funded, it should be publicly available for free. And this would be one alternative to do that. Another insight we heard from people who were part of this debate or this conversation at this workshop at Siop is, how do we make people in IO more approachable? How do we stop being, for lack of a better term, snobby? Mm-hmm. How do we stop being pompous? How do we start being more approachable? And I shared, well, I've got a podcast and I'm trying to do just that. Yeah. So, I think an opportunity for us is to just be more approachable. I know we spent a lot of our time being rigorous so we can be respected by other fields in science. But I think if we're just nice, and if we just share, hey, I'm a regular person too. I like watching Marvel just like you do. I'm a fan of Starbucks just like you, if we're just
Yeah.
decent people, I think people will come around to.
I think y'all are nice. And I think we talked about this,
Yeah.
right? We were eating
Yeah.
breakfast at Thornton's, I believe, which is really good breakfast, by the way, in Boston, for anybody who's looking. But as an HR VP, I got to hear what everyone else's thoughts were and how people partners are sometimes difficult to work with, and how can I get them to do the narrative that I need them to do, and how can I get them to do this and that. And as somebody that was new, right, and just kind of glancing in through the window, just kind of seeing what y'all do, I do agree with you on, I don't want to say pompous or snobby, but I do feel like because of the hard work that everyone's done, right? There's a lot of doctors walking around, a lot of people with masters walking around, and it does create some sort of like high environment, like where it's like, I'm it, right? I did it. I'm smart. I know what I'm doing. And that's totally fine. I have a master's as well. But I think that that's the reason why probably Siop isn't as big as it can be. And this is something that I was telling you, that everyone talks about, why isn't IOP more recognized? Why isn't IOP in more businesses?
Yeah.
Why isn't IOP,
Yeah.
And so it's like, maybe it's because y'all aren't trying to be regular people,
I think we have an opportunity to be more approachable, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to pair my IO degree with an MBA, is that I recognized, and I heard this a couple of times at Siop, is that science practitioner gap still exists. And I think part of it goes back to, we need to be, as IOs, we need to be better or do a better job at being approachable. We can't have this holier than thou, nose up in the air, I know better, just listen to me kind of attitude. We need to approach it, I think, from a place of empathy, where we need to collaborate as IOs with people in the business, so that way we can share the benefits of our field instead of just expecting people to fall in line. They haven't read our research, they haven't taken the time to learn the things that we've learned, and we can't fault them for doing that. They took a different route. They decided to focus on different things, and so they have a different priority when it comes to business. And so for me, I think IOs, we have an opportunity to be more approachable and share our findings more in line, in a verbiage, a language, an approach that is more acceptable to them, that they have a better opportunity to understand.
Yeah. And I think Dr. Kath is starting that with the IO psychology memes, which is great, because I follow her too on LinkedIn. And it's crazy because another part that came up, we actually went to the Latinos and IO luncheon, right, at Amelia's Taqueria, which was hosted by, and I don't know if you remember.
I do, Zitlali over at the Cal State San Bernardino program. Shout out to you. Thank you for hosting. Thank you for making it happen.
Yeah, I think that one of the things we asked was, well, why isn't, the Latinos and IO at the conference, right? Why aren't they having their own, I don't know, room 310 or 302 or ballroom A, right? Because that thing was packed. It was super packed. And what did the host say to you, or one of the hosts?
Yeah, I don't remember specifically, but it was something along the lines of the Latino program, or the Latinos in IO, wasn't big enough for Siop to take it seriously. And so the LIOP, Latinos in IO, they decided, all right, we're going to do our own thing. And Latinos turned out.
Yeah.
They turned out as my people would. And so I appreciate it. And it was amazing to see that many Latinos in IO. So for me, it's been rare for me to see other Latinos and to see so many come together and to really just be happy and be able to, how can I say this, kind of let our guards down a little bit. That it's okay, we can be Latino and in IO at the same time. And so it was a nice experience for me to be able to see so many. It filled my heart.
Yeah, of course, because you are Latino, I'm Latina, and even though I'm not a part of the IO bubble, right, I do not have a master's in IO, just so everyone knows. I do have a master's in healthcare delivery, which is the administration side of hospitals, but that filled me with joy because I know you as an IO, and I think of you as a very smart person. So I know a lot of y'all are very smart. And so I think that to have that many Latinos present there was orgullo, right? You were proud.
Mi gente.
Yeah, you were proud. And I think it was awesome for y'all to connect because Latinos have to help each other. You know what I mean? Like, speaking about, like, you know, networking and all of that, that is the point of Siop. Also another point to it, right? Besides the research, besides all the new stuff that's coming out, it is networking. It is getting to know others in the field, getting to know what others are doing. And I think that Latinos should have that space. And I think that it was great that you got to connect with a couple people there, trade some information just to help them out in the future. So I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and quick shout out to Andres Castillo. It was nice meeting you there. I have seen, so you and I have a conversation to have. It's on my to-do list. I'm not ignoring you or haven't forgot about you. It's just I've been a little busy coming back from Siop, playing catch up at work. You know how it is.
Don't worry, Andres. I'll make sure he answers your message soon.
I'll get back to you.
All right. So, I guess with that, I don't know if there's any other topic or surrounding that you think.
Just one other thing. I also did get a chance to connect with the host of the IO podcast, Dr. Victoria Mattingly. So it was great running into you at Dunkin' Donuts. I'm excited to collaborate with you, hopefully sometime in the future, so we can continue pushing IO out into the mainstream. Like I shared before, I definitely think there's an opportunity for us to really shine in terms of how we can benefit not only the workplace, but potentially society at large. So shout out to you. Looking forward to having that conversation as well.
And you were nervous about going
I was, no lie.
I had to push you that way.
Yeah, but I'm glad you did because I was able to
connect.
Yeah, eventually, just bite the bullet and all right, I'm going to do it.
Yeah, and I think her seeing your face, you seeing her face, and then also just recognizing her for her work. I think a lot of people forget, you're behind the podcast, you're the voice behind the podcast, and no one really feels like you're in another universe to these folks, right? So I think it was really cool that you were able to tell Victoria in person how much you like her podcast. So with that being said, is there any other ones that really kind of stood out to you before we get into workshops? Because I know you took one, I took one, you took two, and I took one.
And so one of the seminars that kind of resonated with me or stuck with me, two more, and then I'll stop taking a deep dive into what I experienced. But one is the idea of a skills-based or skills-first organization. So essentially taking away all the educational requirements, all the experience requirements, and really hiring, developing, and promoting strictly based on skills. And so it's really
interesting.
I thought it was interesting that I kind of felt this 2016, 2017. Why do we require so much education?
You've been telling me for a minute.
Why do we require years of experience where we have the ability and the technology to be able to skills test everyone? I felt to be more inclusive and to broaden the potential pool of candidates, we can get rid of education and experience requirements altogether and test, hire, and promote strictly based on skills. And it's interesting to hear that there are, I think it was either Allstate or IBM. I don't remember the specific organization, but they're experimenting with it and they're finding positive results, especially with AI. Going back to AI, AI as a co-pilot and being able to craft and recommend skills for different levels within disciplines at the organization. And so I see this potentially being the way of the future, that degrees are going to be a thing of the past, years of experience are going to be a thing of the past, and it's going to be strictly based on skills. Skills pay the bills.
Do you think that's going to happen in the next 10 years?
Organizations are making way. If, as a society, we truly value diversity, equity, and inclusion, this has to be the way.
That's going to be a big test, though, because we say we're developing that way, right? We're saying, DEI and B is important to a lot of these organizations, and if this is something that they choose not to go with, you are right. It is inclusive. Not everyone has the money to get a master's or continue in a bachelor's. I know I was one of those folks that I wasn't able to get a master's till after I was 30 with a full-time job. And that's still with a loan because I couldn't outright pay it. And so I hope that more companies do go that route because I think it is going to be very, very inclusive.
I know the private sector is more open to experimenting with this. As of today, April 24th, 2023, I only know of one public organization that is getting rid of the education requirement. And I want to say it's a city near Pittsburgh, or if not Pittsburgh itself, that they're foregoing the education requirement. And so I'm curious to see if more public agencies would be open to doing it. I know, quick side note, I worked in the public sector for a little bit, and this was a recommendation I made pretty vocally. Pretty vocally, that why are we requiring degrees, or why are we requiring years of experience? Let's just test candidates and see if they have the skills.
And it's funny because a lot of I want to say the gatekeepers of the education and the requirements, right, are really heavy or even getting worse for entry-level positions. I think Adam, what's his last name? Adam,
Karpiak?
Yes, he talks a lot about that, where it's like, you need 20 years of experience and, a master's degree to make $40,000 a year. And I think that's absurd.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. Yeah. And if there's an alternative path for somebody to learn the skills, but they still have them, does it matter where they learn them? Whether they went through a formal degree program, whether they went through some kind of certification or, badge or certificate program, or whether they learned them on YouTube or went through something like Coursera or, some other Udemy, some other alternative provider. It shouldn't really matter how they learn the skills.
As long as they have
As long as they have them.
Yeah, I agree with that. It goes back to what we were talking about, right? Everything has gatekeeping, and it's really important to give everybody a chance. And you are right. There's so many ways somebody can learn a skill. And it should be the job's responsibility to develop the person anyways, especially if they want them to be, successful in their role. I always find it funny when, somebody gets hired and the expectation is that they're going to grow into, I don't know, I'm just making it up, a director in something, but they started out as a supervisor. Like, it's not going to happen overnight, and it's not going to happen on their dime. It really does. If the investment comes from the company. And so learning and development is very big in my perspective.
And with skills changing at an ever increasing rate, we might have to take that route where not every candidate is going to have all the skills they need in perpetuity for the rest of their career. They have to be essentially trainable, coachable, and have learning agility to be able to learn the skills, to be able to continue to thrive moving forward. And so we might have to make, for lack of a better term, concessions in terms of this person doesn't have all the skills, but they have the ability to learn the skills needed to be successful. So we might have to change how we're hiring, how we're promoting, how we're developing.
Yeah. All right, next one.
The final one, the most controversial one, the most interesting one, was revising the meta-analytic validity originally found by Schmidt and Hunter. Schmidt and Hunter did a not groundbreaking, but thoughtful and provoking and insightful meta-analytic research where they looked at different selection tools, from structured interviewing to personality tests to general mental ability to work samples, ranked order them in terms of their predictive power. And their conclusion was, looking at all selection systems or selection processes, general mental ability was found to be most predictive of future performance on the job. And we took that as grad students. That's what we learned in grad school. A meta-analysis is kind of the highest form of research that can be done, because it's the research of research. So it's pulling different researches together to come up with an overall finding across a variety of different research. And we took that. General mental ability was the strongest predictor of future performance on the job. And some of those validity coefficients or correlations between selection tools and performance, they seemed a little high. I mean, coming from a practitioner background, and some panel members who were part of this seminar also shared, we could just never get it as high, that validity coefficient, as what Schmidt and Hunter found in their meta-analysis. I mean, some of them were, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6 in terms of the relationship between the selection tool and performance. I mean, from a practitioner perspective, we got lucky if we got like 0.3, 0.25. And even then, it's like, what am I doing wrong? I am nowhere close. Am I just not creative enough? Is my job analysis not on point? What is going on here? So Paul Sackett comes out the woodwork, reevaluates that meta-analysis, and essentially found Schmidt and Hunter did a restriction of range correction. And I'm going down a deep rabbit hole here. So if I'm getting a little lost myself. So if I get a little tongue-tied, or if I'm a little off base, feel free to let me know in the comments or in the feedback for this particular episode. But essentially, Schmidt and Hunter did a correction, and due to that correction, they artificially inflated the relationship between the selection tool and performance. And so what Paul Sackett and team did is what's the word that I'm looking for? Moderated that or mediated that correction, essentially corrected for the correction, and found that the relationship between the selection tools and performance was not as strong as previously stated. In fact, based on Paul Sackett's re-review of all the research, he actually found a different selection tool that was more predictive of performance on the job than general mental ability.
And what was that?
For me, this came out of nowhere. It's almost so in your face, so obvious that it makes sense. It's the structured interview.
And you've been talking about those for a minute too.
I have. Behaviorally based structured interviews. Most companies, if they just got that right, they do a pretty good job of hiring. Most people, based on my experience, they hire based on their gut. They don't ask the same interview questions across candidates. They mix it up, mix and match, and they feel, quote unquote, feel this is going to be a good person on the job. Based on my experience, quote unquote, feel is another word for bias.
Yeah.
That this person
1000%.
fits my bias. They fit my expectation, my preconceived notion of what I think a qualified candidate should be. Whereas if we actually take what's needed to be successful on the job, identify that criteria, and develop structured, behaviorally based interview questions off of that, we'd be right a good portion of the time. We dramatically improve the probability of selecting someone who's going to be successful on the job. So in sum, and so it wasn't, this seminar wasn't as easy peasy. The panel, they didn't just fold and accept Dr. Paul Sackett's findings. Some were a little salty.
Yeah.
And so one of the pieces of feedback is, well, GMA is still predictive of specific pieces of performance. So the higher the cognitive load and the more specific someone can be in the type of performance someone is going to do on the job, general mental ability can still be highly predictive of that. So I'm thinking they didn't go into specifics, but for a job where there is a high cognitive load in order to be successful. So I'm thinking potentially maybe someone who's in data science or who's writing, lines of code very quickly. That skill set may still lend itself to being predicted by high scores on general mental ability. But when looking at performance overall, there are so many other things that need to be taken into account when somebody performs well. Not only do they need the raw horsepower, but in today's world where most work is collaborative, they also have to be able to work well with others. And so general mental ability may or may not play a role in that instance. Being able to have empathy, being able to work as a team, being able to communicate. You don't always need to have the strongest cognitive ability to be able to do that effectively. That just being a good person, that's starting to play a bigger role in successful performance overall. Going back to artificial intelligence, if that is going to be the workhorse and take the major horsepower in being able to crunch numbers and potentially create predictive models, at work we have to be able to work together. And so as performance gets more and more community based, more and more interpersonally based, I can see general cognitive ability playing a smaller role in being able to predict overall performance.
Hi,
Yeah. Yeah. So it's going to be wild the next couple of years.
Yeah. I can only imagine. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Okay. So, let's get into workshops.
Okay.
So you took 2 workshops and I took 1.
Yeah.
You took, I think it was I need help, or what is it?
Help me with R.
Yeah.
And so, full transparency, I think I was one of the last schools or cohorts that was still using SPSS. From my understanding, R really started to take off in mid 2010s, 2014, 2015, 2016, when I had just graduated. And so I never really got a chance to really dig into R. From my understanding from the outside, it's similar to SPSS, but we just need to write code to be able to have R do the same kind of functionality. So I went into it naively, thinking that I know what an ANOVA is. I know what a regression is. I know what a correlation
That's
is.
your IO coming out.
Yeah. How hard can it really be? All I got to do is type in, run this analysis for me. And I'm thinking, it can't be that hard.
Yeah.
Going into this workshop, the analysis is the easy part. The hard part is figuring out how to write the code to be able to structure your data in such a way that R understands what you're telling it to do. Taking a step back, there are 2 systems. There's R and R Studio. And so I need to figure out how to use R Studio, which then uses R to conduct the analysis I want it to conduct in the order I want it to conduct it for me. And so the first part of the workshop, I was cruising along, following along, being able to type in the code. I was thinking, okay, I got this. Then my laptop decides to update right in the middle of all of that. Just shuts down, and that little, your laptop is updating with a percentage. It took about 15 minutes. Yeah. And so that's when the analysis started to, go into its next phase, being able to take essentially a database or a tibble. Apparently that's a fancy way of saying table, but it's being able to create custom tibbles by pulling data from different databases and creating your own table, which you'll then conduct the analysis on top of that. So I was in the middle of doing that, typing that code in, being able to extract all that data, create my own table. Boom, let's restart. And I lost all the code and all the data that I had in R Studio that I just couldn't catch up.
Oh no.
Yeah. And so I just had to sit back and watch the presenter do his thing.
Really?
Yeah. It just got to
How long did you end up just doing that for? The rest of the thing?
like 20 minutes. Yeah.
Was this at the end?
Yeah.
Or? Okay. Because
Yeah.
then I was going to say, damn, that's a waste of money.
Yeah. The first part of the workshop was an overview of R. What is it? How can we approach it? How can we best utilize it? The middle part was kind of intro to coding, intro to creating your own tibbles, which I was, working through. The last part was a word problem. So this is the data. This is the table we're trying to create. I need you to manipulate it and create and tell me your findings and whether they're statistically significant or not, and create, a modest visualization. So I didn't get to do the last third.
Okay.
I got a chance to do the first third, about halfway through the second, then the third. See you later. So, you're on my to-do list. I'm not through with you yet.
Okay. Do you want me to talk about mine?
Sure.
All right. So I did employee listening, and I obviously am not an IO, as many have been listening to this podcast. I am just an HRBP, and I was actually given employee listening. So we're going to be using something called Culture Amp, and I'm brand new. And I really did think that this workshop really helped me kind of understand, where the current listening state of my organization is, which is great. It also kind of let me know that there was 4 different stages of listening strategy maturity, which I didn't know existed. And then what defines each of those strategies, right? So I thought that was really, really interesting. They talked about passive listening, which is what we just talked about earlier today. Everybody was very excited about, which I didn't want to be the sour note on that, or the sour apple, and say, is everybody really okay with privacy being not there? It really kind of got down to the nitty gritty of how to develop a listening strategy, kind of using a purpose and then a focus, the owners of it and the design. And so I think that that's really going to help me personally when I start doing the listening portion of our organization. So obviously there was a lot for me to remember. I have a couple notes, but the presenters were Megan Steckler and Alec Munich. With both of them were really, really nice. They were very easy to understand, especially for someone who is not an IO, which I thought was very important, because if I would have gone into it, and they were talking all this IO lingo, then I probably would have been extremely lost. Even though he went into what is it, multivariate stuff, and I was like, what? Are you sure? And then he started like, let's take a deep dive, and I was like, let's not. So, I'm very excited about it. I do want to give a shout out to Chloe. I think it was Lamel, and I apologize if I'm saying your last name wrong. She was really, really sweet to me. When we were networking at the end of the workshops, I thought that was really nice of her. And there was I think Dr. Kath was also really nice. So there's a couple people that really stood out to me during the Siop conference. So I think those that were really nice to me, because I don't have an IO degree, and it was really nice to kind of just say, oh, that's quite all right. So what do you do? And Desmond too. Desmond from
SHL.
Yeah, such a great guy. Yeah. So shout out to him also for making me feel like, I belonged in this society y'all are in.
Yeah. And shout out to Brandon. We had a chance to talk about barbecue.
Oh yeah.
And so he was telling me about the barbecue they make in Kansas City, and apparently he's been in the World Series of barbecue.
Yeah.
That he won a couple of awards. So I'm excited at potentially getting to try your barbecue someday.
You're gonna have to hit him up and say, what's going on? Because I know you're a big barbecue fiend.
Yeah.
So
there was one thing too I wanted to add about the employee listening program that you shared with me, where survey fatigue really isn't a thing.
I forgot about that.
It's not listening fatigue.
It's non-action fatigue is what it was.
Non-action fatigue.
Yeah, so employees don't get tired of taking the surveys. They get tired of not having any action after the surveys.
Yeah. And intuitively, that makes sense. Imagine you keep telling someone your thoughts, but nothing happens. Eventually, you just get tired of it.
Yeah.
I'm not giving you any more answers because you're not doing anything for me. So forget it.
Yeah.
Forget it.
Thanks for bringing that to highlight, because I think that was something that I did get as well. Because I thought people just hated taking surveys. I think even in the last seminar that we took, the very last day on a Saturday at 2:00 in the afternoon, I think Kyle was in that one.
Kyle guy, yeah,
and,
at it again.
And I think he was mentioning something about survey fatigue, or I don't know if it was another one of the panelists. But my first thought was going back to the listening workshop and saying, I really wanted to be like, that's not it. It's a no action fatigue.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and one of the ways he recommended in that final seminar is essentially sharing with respondents, this is the data that we're receiving. Yeah. So thank you for your participation. This is what we found. And taking that one step further, this is what we plan on doing based on what you're telling us. So if you can, if as practitioners, we can loop respondents back in and share with them, this is the data, this is what we plan on doing, they'd be much more likely to share their insights moving forward.
And it's funny because in the workshop, they did talk about that a lot of people or a lot of organizations, so there's 4 stages, and I'm sorry, I don't remember what they were, but there's 4 stages, and I guess no one can really get out of the second stage. And I think the third and fourth stage is really honing in on the feedback, giving the feedback, and making an action plan from the information gathered through the surveys. And so it goes back to your point, right? Like actually doing something with it and having an actual action plan and presenting it. I know in our organization, we do communicate the results, but that's it, right? There is no action plan for it. And we forget, you know what I mean? We're all, it's a, you know, our bandwidth is not as big as I would like it to be. But I think that's important to let everybody out there know that if you are doing a listening part or listening, what is it, program, that you are, giving the feedback back and that you are actually, making an action plan for it. So I think that's very important to note.
So for me, the second workshop I had a chance to be a part of was one that again focused on evaluating the effectiveness of different people programs. And so this was, we had somebody from Walmart and a well-renowned researcher, Wayne Cassio, I think was his name. They shared their perspectives on how do we evaluate the effectiveness of the program. And interestingly enough, they shared the foundation or the backbone or the springboard that they used is the Kirkpatrick model. And so I found that funny that, that's definitely one. So the Kirkpatrick model has been used traditionally to evaluate the effectiveness of learning programs. And the Phillips family, husband and wife, they wondered if that same approach can be utilized to evaluate the effectiveness of other programs. And I think it can. Walmart, as a practitioner, they shared that they utilize that in evaluating the effectiveness of a new selection process they were using for high volume hiring. And so what I was really interested in learning about is, does the tech world utilize the Kirkpatrick model? And so there was one seminar where there were a couple of people who were going to share how they evaluate the effectiveness of different programs. And the Kirkpatrick model really didn't come up. They talked about KPIs and, other potential methods. But Walmart definitely shared that they utilize the Kirkpatrick model. And so I'm excited to know that I'm on the right path of being able to evaluate program effectiveness. And the reason I find this funny is I was asked during an interview with a cryptocurrency company, if I were to be hired as a part of their team, how would I evaluate the effectiveness of a selection process? And I shared I'd probably utilize the Kirkpatrick model. I'd adapt it a little bit so that way it can be used to evaluate selection. And I got the feedback based on that interview that I was too academic. I was off base. That my approach probably wouldn't work. And I thought it was interesting that not only does it work, but other companies are also utilizing it to also evaluate the effectiveness of selection processes. And so this was maybe a year ago where I got this notice back when, cryptocurrency was really on the rise. Everybody wanted to be a part of it. I still see it potentially as the future. This is where NFTs were a big thing. What is that? That's Stoned Ape. They were a big deal. Those. And so I was really excited. Got the opportunity to go all the way to the hiring interview, where I then interviewed with an entire panel, shared a PowerPoint on how I would go about evaluating the effectiveness of a selection process. And they told me, thanks, but no thanks. We think you're unrealistic. Only to find out a year later, I was right on target.
Mic drop, baby.
Pretty much.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think that that's what they told you, but, they're lost, right? They're lost, and it just goes to show that you are on the right path, and, it is awesome that you are there, so good for you.
Yeah.
All right, well, I think that's a good summary of, the Siop conference, don't you think?
I think so, too.
You also ran into your old professor.
I did. Shout out to Mark Agers, Dr. Mark Agers. It was good seeing you. It had to have been at least 10 years.
Yeah, for sure.
Since the last time I saw you. So it was good catching up with you. Good to see, all is well. Seems like there's still a strong San Bernardino program. Again, shout out to Zitlali and the Latinos in IO. From my understanding, Mark shared a couple were presenting at Siop. Their research is students.
Yeah.
So it's good to hear things are still going well.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm trying to think of if there's anything else I wanted to ask you, but I think we kind of went over everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was great.
Think so too. Yeah. I had a good experience. This was a good Siop. It lets me know in my professional world, I'm on the right path with what I'm trying to do with the company that I'm working with now. And so I'm excited. It was refreshing and reinforcing to hear others are on the same path as I am. And I think it was a good Siop for 2023.
I agree. And so on the next episode, we wanted to talk about Boston and what our thoughts were about Boston. So we don't want to give it away yet and what our thoughts were. But, I think you should do a poll. I think the poll should be, do the people or the audience want to hear our perspectives about Boston, and if they want me back to give you, more questions about Boston and kind of dive into that. And if not, that's quite all right too. You can go ahead and go on to your 5th episode, which will keep it under wraps until then. Yeah. So I hope everyone has a great night, day, or wherever you're at. And we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And we'll see you in the next episode.